I'm joined by Denarius, also known as Christian, just moments after he has won the first Square-based online tournament. Congratulations.
Thanks, Ed.
You look remarkably calm for a man who's just had to go through.
Definitely not. I'm amped up. It was a very intense game, especially the ending, right down to the wire.
Yeah, absolutely. So there will be a video coming out. I'm not sure if Al's going to put out the full video or if he's going to cut it down. But there were quite a lot of internet issues, basically connection to Warhol. So what was what was a hard stop of about 3 hours 15 from when we started ended up probably only being about 1 hour 40 of playtime. So it ended up being a shorter game, which meant that the game ended at the end of was it Kairos' turn 3 or your turn 3?
3 or 4?
4. Yeah. I think it might have got into your turn 4. Yes, that's right.
4, yeah.
But it did look like, so obviously you won. It did look like if you'd continued onwards, it was likely going to go in your favor after the last pivotal dice roll went.
Yes,
you were safe from it.
That last roll, so I had a dramatic duel between my dragon and his wyvern.
Yep.
Had him down to 1 wound. Kept trying to finish the guy off. He just kept making every save, and then somehow even won the last round of combat. But luckily the dragon did not flee, because that was the final action of the game, because the time was run out.
It was, yeah. I don't know if you sold that enough. So got into combat, I think at the bottom of turn 2, or maybe I think it must have been the bottom of turn 2, and then stuck in combat for I think 4 rounds of combat. So just, a wyvern, typically not the thing that can survive a wood elf dragon on you've got the full -1 to hit, -1 weapon skill. You're an incredible beefcake. You're doing way more damage in theory than the wyvern is. The wyvern's hitting back. The wyvern's using hand weapon and shield to survive. Just doesn't die. Every dice roll.
He shouldn't be hurting me as well with the hand weapon. He was just rolling really well.
The wyvern wasn't doing very much damage. It was the hand weapon.
Last round.
That's true.
I mean, it was about average until the last round, I think. Like, they are very tough, and I was wearing him down. But yeah, he just spiked incredibly the last round. Did a couple wounds, and I just rolled atrociously and lost the combat. But yeah. Dice be praised. The dragon didn't flee, so
yeah, absolutely.
To see that roll, I was starting to get that feeling in my stomach of like, oh god, is this how it ends after all of that? Because overall, it felt like a decent game. It was difficult. His Doom Divers were just demolishing my Glade Riders, right? That Mage's unit. It was again, they were pretty good rolls because it was indirect fire, but Doom Divers are just so dangerous for my army. Like, we've got their toughness 3, no armor. The Glade Riders, they just melt, and he was getting some good shots off. I did at least get to delay his shots with the dragon, the threat of the dragon, which I was quite happy with. He wasn't getting any misfires. I was waiting for those. But the Doom Divers were really keeping him in the game, I would say. They performed really well. Yeah,
I think they're some of the best units in the Orcs and Goblins book.
Absolutely.
But that's not why we're here. Let's talk about the Wood Elves, the winning faction, the one that took you all the way to the final. So do you want to give us a quick overview of what the list is and how it functions, why you built it that way?
Yeah. So it was actually a last-minute change. So I had a similar list previously, which had a BSB. Actually, the idea is the BSB would go in a unit of Sisters and get a free ward save from the Sisters, right? Just leaning into the awesomeness of the Sisters even more. This is almost over the top, but the rule is that the unit gets a 4+ ward save.
Right.
So a character in the unit gets that, which seems probably over the top, but yeah, the idea was to sort of make a hybrid, sort of semi-competent combat unit with the BSB and the War Banner, and it could sort of support the dragon. And it was a pretty cool. It was pretty effective in some practice games before the tournament, but yeah, last minute I decided to just lean into the pillars completely and just take a level 2, take a level 4, hope that the level 4 rolls it, and yeah, as you saw, I can get up to 5 pillars, which they're sort of exponentially awesome, right? Like 1 pillar is really good, 2 is even better, and as you keep going up, when you get 5, it's just amazing, right? You could just create this inferno hellscape of a battlefield, and it's not only the damage they do, it's the dangerous terrain, it's the slowing them. So yeah, in a nutshell, I'd say it's really a sisters oriented list. It relies on casting a lot of pillars. The mages do that, the sisters do that. It's got a lot of shooting, poison arrows across the board. I noticed that the biggest dangers to my list, or the biggest threats, I thought were like fast flying monsters, things like necrosphinxes or dragons, or those sort of things. And so I thought poison arrows would be the go. And yeah, the dragon's role is basically, he's the one combat piece I have in the whole army. So
but what a hell of a combat piece.
Oh, so I've kitted him to be very defensive and very survivable. And look, evasive, right? I said it earlier, like I love evasive on the Wood Elf Dragon. In that game, it got him into the position so he could get that flank charge. Maybe a bit of a mistake by Chris to cast it, but he also wanted to do some wounds on the dragon, so I can sort of see why he did it. But yeah, that definitely helped a lot, right? The evasive ability just got him where he needed to be. I think he was still in a decent location without it. But
so just to describe the sort of setup, your dragon was set up not to be able to charge anything other than the Doom Divers.
Or the Mangler,
or the Mangler Squig, and it had some black.
It's going to stack, stack on points, which is actually lower risk, and probably would have worked actually in terms of, I wasn't thinking about the hard stop with the stoppage time, but it probably would have been enough just to get 100 or 200 points from those stacking on those units. But there's always the risk, one good Doom Diver shot killing the mage, because I didn't have Lookout Sir at that stage.
It's true.
Because I've been chipped down in Blade Riders. Yeah, if it just killed the level 4 or something, then he wins. So it was it never felt like, oh, I've got the game in hand. Even literally the last roll was like, this could lose the game, or at least draw the game. Yeah, so very very tough.
Yeah,
but yeah, I would say the list performed basically as intended, broadly, under time pressure. So I don't think optimal play by myself, but that's basically the idea. But he has a very interesting list that is quite threatening to mine, actually, surprisingly threatening to mine, because the dragon can't generally charge that big unit of Black Orcs. They've got so much combat res that even if the dragon gets a full overkill, he loses, and then he's double outnumbered. So it's dangerous. And the Wyvern is amazing value, right? He costs, half the points of my dragon, or a bit over. And look how well he did, right? He basically, was almost a match for him. And the Fanatics, they can do some real damage. He killed my scouts. He killed Glade Riders. I think there was some misplay on my part. I could have protected the Glade Riders a bit better with the forests. Could have moved the scouts a bit better. So not ideal moves, but broadly speaking, I think it went how it is meant to go for that army. That's sort of the idea. Send a lot of pillars their way, use the dragon as the one sort of decisive combat piece. He needs to really be moved well and play an important role in the game, because he's all I got. There's nothing else in my army that's competent in combat. It just gets smashed. But if we can avoid combat, that's the Wood Elf way, right?
Absolutely, you've got to dance around. So let's just talk about the Pillars of Fire for a second. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to get access to it. If I can, I'll put up a picture here of sort of the back end of the game where Kairos was completely hemmed in by 5 Pillars of Flame just around his entire army. But so the way Pillar of Flame works, for anyone who might not be aware, if they've somehow lived under a rock and missed it, is it's a vortex that you choose the direction of. It's the only one in the game which you choose the way it moves. And if you move it over something, it does D3 plus 3, Strength 3, AP 2 auto hits, which in volume, as you were saying, it's a thing that increases exponentially.
Absolutely. But in particular, it's I find it's the dangerous terrain feature of it that can be even better, right? Just for slowing them down. It's got amazing synergy for the Wood Elves in particular, because we want to keep people away. We want to slow people. We want to outmaneuver. So having dangerous terrain pieces that you can move around even if it only did that, I would probably still like the spell, right? Like it's that good. It's possibly overpowered, probably overpowered, I would say.
I think that might be a full discussion for another time, but I would say that it's probably okay if you've got one, very strong if you've got two, and when you get to the one army in the game that can bring consistently 3 to 5, maybe a little bit too good, that's probably where I'd put it.
I think that's fair.
There are a few things in the game that have similar sort of power levels.
That's true. I mean, like one idea of balance is that everyone is overpowered, right? So that's one design philosophy to balance is just give every army really cool broken stuff and let them all just smash it out, and that is the game, rather than this overly sort of bland leveled equality and everything's balanced, but where's the fun of Warhammer, right? You don't want to go too far that direction either.
Sure.
So it wouldn't be hard to balance it slightly. I don't know, make it strength 2 even on the pillar, or like you could just do something like that even, and that would
I think for me, I just like to see it go back to a random direction. I know that pretty much stops the spell from having this list use, but all of the rest of the vortexes are random moves. That seems like the obvious way to go.
That's one way, or make it D3 instead of D6 is another idea. I do like that it has a sort of uniqueness to it, though, in that like it's fun that one can be directed and others can't. I don't mind that difference, but you probably have to do more to weaken it because you are getting that control.
I think I found the fix. So leave the spell as it is, but vortexes can be dispelled from the vortex position, not from the caster position. So then it still has the unique, it works in the same way, but
I think they'll all just get dispelled instantly though by level 4. That's the trouble. Yeah. So that probably is. It's I think that's probably too far.
Sure.
I think the issue, I mean, look, I find it a really interesting list, and it's been fun to play. I think I'm probably going to take a break from Wood Elves after this. They are a very finicky, finesse sort of army, tricky, and you could see I was making some blunders due to the time pressure. Just one of those blunders could have cost me the game, right? Like, I didn't need to allow his fanatic to be able to hit my mages unit, which has got like a lot of points in it. I could have just moved the tree over slightly, but I didn't, and that could have that one sort of rush move could have cost the game. So they're not a fun army to play under time pressure, I'd say. And they just are a difficult army to use. I think I'm interested in switching over to Bretonnians for the next SVOT tournament. Would probably be my call.
Sure. Just for anyone watching, the having played similar sort of 40k style armies, this is the sort of thing that is a lot faster to play in person. A lot of the minutiae of online play does slow you down.
Skirmishes do suffer under the current Warhol UI, definitely. And it would be, I mean, and just the stability issues that we face during the game were not ideal. I mean, look, I love Warhol, and I think it's got a lot of potential, and I think with a bit of love, it can be so much better. So I'm really looking forward to them upgrading those aspects.
Absolutely. So, the best unit in the army, Sisters of the Thorn. I don't think that's unfair to say.
I think
do you ever use one of their strongest aspects, which is the flexibility of picking the spell, or do you just go 3 pills of fire every game? Let's go.
Yeah, I think sadly it probably always is better to pick the 3 pillars. Almost always. Maybe a Plague of Rust could be interesting.
That's the other obvious.
That would probably be the next choice. It's quite hard to cast, is the issue. Hexes in particular are hard to cast because the reason why the pillars are so great for the Sisters is because they can sit out of dispel range, right? So they're not doing contested casts. That's the real issue. And then once you've got the pillar off, they can use their speed to just stay out of dispel range, like how I basically did in that game. The issue with the other spells is they often will have to get into range of a level 4, and then they're just not going to get anything off. So, and then on top of that, there's all the other awesome things about the pillars, like we were talking about. So, in practice, it always competitively high level, I would say it almost always is all 3 pillars. Yeah, I can't really think when it wouldn't be. Maybe if there's some flame resistant army or something, but even then it's probably even then it's probably still the right choice.
Yeah, that's fair. Or if they've got maybe a mobile mage that you can sort of skirt around the outsides, really combine those poison javelins with some Plague of Rust, something along those lines.
People have said good things about Wind Blast, and you can get like a triple Wind Blast and push a unit off the board, turn 1, which is pretty evil. But again, I just find it's got a 15-inch range, so how are you getting the sisters all the way forward? You're probably getting into their Dispel Bubble, and then
very much so, yeah. Does that work? You can only flee once per turn. Is Give Ground a flee, or is it a specific?
I think you can do multiple Give Grounds.
Yeah, great. I'll make sure that if my opponent's got triple Wind Blast.
I haven't actually used that tactic, but I've heard people.
Yeah, the sort of thing you read on Discord and go, "Oh, I'll file that away for later use," and then it never comes up.
But I don't think it's a cool idea, but I don't think it's actually that effective in practice.
Fantastic. Well, so let's have a quick talk about your run through. We don't have to go sort of blow by blow in each game, but you had a pretty good who's who of competitive armies. So you started off into Tomb Kings, and I believe had another Tomb Kings game later on. Then you were into Orcs, and obviously you've just played the final into Orcs.
Yeah, I had a couple of Orcs.
Yeah, you went into the Vampire Counts list that I don't think it made it into the pre-interview when I cut it down, but we did talk about before. I think it was a very strong list there. And then you also played in the last round, round 5 before the final, into a very solid Errantry Crusade Bretonnians list.
Yes.
So how did you find those matchups? Let's start with the Tomb Kings. How do you find the game into Tomb Kings?
So the first one was interesting. I was this was the very first game against Tomb Kings. That one I was maybe a bit overconfident, honestly. I thought, this seems like a pretty good matchup, and he had like a king without Armor of Ages. So it's not, it doesn't even look like a tournament sort of competitive list. It's like a interesting, cool list, but it's not optimized, right? Because that item is so good for Khemri. And so, sure enough, I flew my dragon straight into him, to take him down. And would you know it, the dice were terrible, and the dragon died on like the first turn. And then it was like, okay, shit, this is a problem. Like, so I was able to recover the game by taking out his Hierophant, luckily, and claw it back and just use the strengths of the army to salvage the win. But that was a bit of a check, a good check on the ego. It's like, okay, this army definitely can lose. Basically, I was feeling quite confident going in because in the practice matches or in the exhibition matches, they'd had a really good run, and it just felt like a very strong, solid list. But actually, so that first game, it started horribly, but was able to be recovered. The other Khemri game was against a very experienced player, Kazandu, and he plays in real life, I believe, and he's on the top tournament scene. And it's a very strong list. It's sort of like a nightmare list in a way for mine because it's got so many fast monsters, right? In some ways it counters the Wood Elves very well. And that game was interesting because he played very defensively, and I think he got spooked. I think on like turn 1, I sort of spiked my rolls against his king and did like 4 wounds very early, and I think he got worried and basically just pulled back his whole army. And I think he was either looking for a draw, or I think what he was going for was hoping I would overextend and sort of get confused, like not know what to do, and then he would pounce. And he did actually get a moment where he got a mirage off on my dragon. He did manage to get a charge off, but I was able to do the Wood Elf thing and just flee with the dragon. They're not too proud to flee, like. And that was enough. We were able to take out his king with just mass shooting after that.
Nice.
So that I think it could have been a really hard game, but I think the particular strategy he took of playing so defensively didn't work so well for him. So that made it, definitely easier than it could have been. The other game versus the Orcs, he had a very Fanatics oriented list, but he only took one Doom Diver and it didn't perform so well. And he did do some damage to my dragon with his Fanatics, but not enough. And we're just able to use the terrain pretty well. So Chris's list is that much scarier just because of the Black Orc unit. I think that just really gives him a fire base. He can put his mages in it. I think in retrospect, he could have run them forward more. I guess he did try. He wasn't getting the Mystic Pathways off, but I was worried that he was going to move that unit really far forward and start dispelling all the pillars, right? Because that's the danger.
That would be the issue. So two things there. Let's first of all talk about why the Black Orc brick is such a problem. So basically, for anyone who doesn't know, the maximum you can ever do in combat with a dragon for combat res is 7, because you're going to get challenged out, and then you're going to do 1 for close order, 1 for a kill, and then 5 for overkill. Takes you to 7. So if you just stack combat res, great.
Well, not that many units can get 7 plus a musician. Like 7 is a lot, right? So I think he's got close order, 2 ranks, BSB, big raggedy flag or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
War banner and batter. So he's got 7 and the musician. So not that many units can get 7.
There are a fair few magic banners that give the D3 or the additional +1 on top of the war banner. But there's not very many armies that are worth taking that infantry block that are, because Black Orcs have that sort of
core as well. That's huge, right? Yeah,
it is, and it unlocks the Black Orc character as well. So it's just money to money in the bank.
You have to pay the tax anyway. So I like what he's done, where he's just leaned into it and just it's like, okay, you have to pay the tax. I'm actually going to make it a feature of my army. I think it's good design. I think our game didn't really highlight the strengths of Black Orcs, because I had to play around it. I just couldn't charge them. He wasn't really getting the spells off that he needed. He really had to not be in dispel range, because that Oaken Stave combination, right? I was just dispelling almost
I'm so glad you said that, because that's the second thing I want to talk about. Oaken Stave. Can you just tell everyone what the Oaken Stave does?
Broken Stave.
Broken Stave.
So the Oaken Stave is an item. It's an arcane item for a mage, and you roll 3 dice and pick the highest 2 when you dispel, if you're within 3 inches of a wood, and you also get an extra 3 inches of dispel range. And both of them are amazing abilities. Like in that game, I was just consistently sitting outside of his dispel range, but he was in mine, and he would start the turn in mine, and he just couldn't escape it. Once you're in that 27 bubble, it's really hard. And I can also tree sing to create mobile woods. So I think he might not have thought of that, actually, because he got taken by surprise a bit by the tree singing combination there.
It basically means that the bonus is always on, because you just cast a wood in front of you.
If you can get 2 off. So tree singing isn't that reliable, because you can fate it to spell it. That's why I like to have 2 casters, the level 2 and the level 4, and usually they can both get it off. And then you've got 2 woods, so you're guaranteed to 1 will stay up as long as you're out of dispel range.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right, so you've gone through that. Obviously, great stuff there. The dragon, something that I'm curious about, how would you rate the Wood Elf dragon compared to the other dragons that it faced against, specifically the Chaos dragon, because that's the one that would worry me.
As in, would I take the duel against the Chaos dragon?
Yes.
Look, I prefer the Wood Elf dragon just because of the utility of evasive and move through cover, right? And all those, they actually are relevant. Both of those were relevant in this game. Like, you could see move through cover actually was relevant. Excuse me. Just gave him that bit of extra movement at a crucial point. The Chaos dragon, look, the Wood Elf dragon can almost survive that duel if he needs to. I'm personally not a fan of taking those fights, because even if it's a coin toss, that's not great odds. right? To gamble a whole game on.
Yeah.
Like, I think ideally against Chaos, I would avoid that duel, and I would just tracing, put Woods in front of the Chaos Dragon all game long, and just ideally he would never get into combat, and maybe even get shot off the board. That would be the dream. And then just use my dragon to terrorize the rest of his army. So, or to, I mean, one of the best roles the Wood Elf Dragon has, I find, is just opponents have to respect the piece, and so you can just sit and sort of defend your line or your bunker. A lot of them units just can't advance freely forward because they don't want to get charged by a dragon, right? Like a mage, for example, a mage on a dragon probably doesn't want to get charged by the Wood Elf Dragon. Like, it is still, it's not an S tier combat unit, but it's pretty close. Like it's the spites are really good.
I think you could argue it's the best dragon in combat point for point, because I think it's cheaper than the Chaos Dragon, even though I'd say the Chaos Dragon is a little scarier with the fights last and
on paper,
the stage stacking as well.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Regen,
their ability to get plus weapon skill, which counteracts your spites. So I think on paper maybe the Chaos Dragon's a bit scary, but also I think you're a fair 100 points cheaper or something along those lines,
which is nice.
It's fairly big.
Chaos Dragon is a big investment, and he probably can't get a level 4 and a level 2 like I do. So
not and a dragon. You might even struggle to get a tooled up level 4 in there as well, because Chaos points are wild. They are very expensive. But yeah, fantastic. So all good stuff there. Something that obviously you said you're going to be looking at Bretonnians for the next event. How do you feel about, are there any other units in the book that you'd be interested in looking at? Say, for example, the Pillar of Fire build goes away for whatever reason. What would be the adaptations that as a Wood Elf player you might look at?
Look, it's a bit unfortunate that the Wood Elf army book is not that well rounded, in my opinion. So the Sisters are an amazing unit, but if you take them away, I don't think there's that much in terms of competitive, play. As a casual list, it's great fun, but I'm not a fan of many of the other units in the Wood Elf book, like War Dancers, Wild Riders, Warhawk Riders, Tree Men. Not a fan of any of them. Shadow Dancer, the what's he called? The Glade Lord, not the Glade Lord, but the sort of shooting Wood Elf hero.
Oh, the Waywatcher,
Way Stalker. And Way Watchers as well. I don't actually think any of them are particularly good. In fact, I think some of them are really quite bad. So this is the issue, to make a really strong Wood Elf list, it has to be based around the Sisters, I think. And that's what my list has basically tried to do is acknowledge that strength and just build the whole list around it. But if you took that away, it's not like they're Khemri or something, and they can be built in multiple feasible, strong ways. It's like they've got one. This is it. I think this build or some variant of it is, I think, the only way to run Wood Elves under the current rules, to be a really strong list. Which is another reason why I'm interested in trying another army, because
once it's solved.
That's exactly. I mean, I can tweak this list, I was saying to you earlier. I put 2 Great Eagles in. I think Great Eagles are amazing. But it's basically solved. It's basically it's optimized. It has to be something like this. It has to have a dragon. Has to have Sisters, and has to have scouts. It's got to be some version of my list. That's a bit of a shame, because I think ideally you want an army book that can be built into multiple strong different options.
Yes.
I think that freedom is really fun.
Yeah. Well, hopefully when the Arcane Journal comes down the line, we'll see that, but maybe we talk about that in a moment. First of all, so I really like this sort of style of list. James Ramsey, who was on the channel a few months ago, took a very similar list to a team event, absolutely dominated there. like things to be just that little bit not quite as optimal, but you're like, oh, but that's quirky. So you can run a version that's 2 Treeman Ancients that are level 4 and a level 4 caster. How do you feel about that?
I mean, cool. Like, what's yeah. I think it's interesting and it's cool, but I don't think I think the dragon brings so much, and Treemen are slow, right? And the mobility, they're so slow, and as you saw in that game, so my mages can join Glade Riders, and they get movement 9 and reserve move, right? Which is they're just both such amazing abilities for a mage, and on top of that, they can take the open stave, right? So you're missing out on all of that to take this Treeman Ancient, and so you've got an immobile unit that's just a sitting duck, basically. Something like a dragon, like a Chaos Dragon can just make a beeline for it and kill it. Like it can't.
Well done. Now these are level 4 casters that have no ability to take ward saves or any improvement to their spellcasting. That must be incredible.
Amazing. Oh, they could take Oaken Shield or something. You know, they can cast it. Yeah, but I mean, they're fluffy and they're great in that sense. But no, I don't think they're a serious tournament level option personally. Yeah.
Yes, no, I agree. It's one of those where the heart wants what the heart wants, but then the brain does have to come in and overrule.
I will say that variant I was talking about earlier with the BSB, I think that's feasible as well. And you can see in that game, like, you know, having 4 pillars or 5 pillars is amazing, but having a BSB is also really, really good. Like for those crucial leadership tests that the dragon takes. I mean, if I just failed, you know, that leadership, luckily I was rolled below that round altogether. And luckily it transferred to the leadership as well. But imagine if I rolled double 6 and just lost the game, right? Like that's awful. So I do like the idea of a BSB.
Yeah, that's very fair. So going forwards, I mentioned the Arcane Journal. The obvious choice for one of the options would be a Forest Spirits list. What would you expect to see outside of the Forest Spirits as the second choice?
That's a tough one, isn't it? Maybe something elf oriented. So I guess that could be maybe Ariel's Chosen or something, or, you know, like really leaning into the human side of the Wood Elves, because excuse me, that's the whole key to their lore, is that they are sort of a weird fusion of you know, forest, primal spirit, and elves, basically. And the combination means that they are neither of those two things, but both of those two things. So I guess logically it would make sense if the other one was a very elf oriented sort of theme, and maybe you can take less forest spirits, or the elves get a bonus.
Yeah, I mean, so from previous Warhammer Fantasy Elf books, Wood Elf books, obviously traditionally, if you were playing a more forest spirit focused list, I think Dryker might have unlocked the ability to take stuff in core or something like that. The forest spirits, it's like there's the ones that like the elves, and the ones that are just a bit more racist. And why not have it on the other end? There's racist elves as well.
Okay, yeah.
That might be,
or maybe an Orion sort of.
I was going to say the Wild Hunt. That's the other thing that sort of jumps out.
That could be cool. I mean, sadly, I think all the forest spirits are pretty bad in the current Wood Elf list. So competitively, I've heard rumors that there's some rule like they're all going to get frenzy or something. That's going to be their thing.
That would suck.
It would really. I mean, it's like, oh great, you know, I've got dryads who are
can charge in any direction, but now due to the skirmisher change, you've basically from one end they all die.
I get 3 strength 3 hand weapon attacks, not 2. So look out. No, I mean, that sounds dreadful. I think it's a shame. Like dryads, they could have kept the strength 4. You know, like it's not. Yeah, they've made them purely a sort of cannon fodder chaff unit. They've taken away the heart of the dryads, which is that they're meant to be scary. You know, like that they can do damage. They're sort of that primal, dangerous threat in the forest, and they don't feel like that at all. So. Yeah, I would tweak the Wood Elf book a bit, tone down the sisters a bit, but I would definitely glow up a few other units that need some love. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be a very healthy approach. So I think I'm very aware that it's probably coming up 3 or maybe later in the morning for you because you are talking from Australia. But the last sort of thing I want to wrap up, obviously, Hagbane tips is the go-to, just across the board. There's not much.
It is the common wisdom, yeah. And originally I did question it and did think, yeah, Arcane Bodkins, maybe 1 unit would be nice. And, but I think the really good thing about Hagbane, so for one, it answers one of our big threats, which is flying monsters. Versus something like Pegasus Knights, Arcane are actually better, but Poison also has the benefit that if you move and if there's additional penalties to your rolls to hit, it doesn't care, right? The 6 is the 6, so you're always looking for the 6s anyway with poison shots. So it just gives them a lot more versatility. Means you can take shots into cover, you can move, you can do things like that, and relatively your output will diminish less. Whereas with Arcane Bodkins, you really need to line up really good perfect shots and not be moving. And there maybe 1 unit there still is an argument for taking some, because Bretonnians are a hard matchup for Wood Elves. I think a really strong Bretonnian list.
Yeah.
So Arcane Bodkins would be great there. Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, as a rule, I think if in doubt, go with Hagbane, 100%.
Yeah. The only other one that I could maybe make an argument for, especially watching your game, there are quite a lot of times where you're taking heavy hit penalties. Is it True Flight?
Flight, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, but...
again, just fish for 6s. Just go for
the
poison, get 6s.
Yeah, I think that's right. I did take a banner on the Glade Riders, which ignores cover, which is pretty cool. It didn't really shine in that game, particularly. But it is a really cool 15-point item. Like I like that bit of tech. And it just saves the headache of having to position your guys to avoid, blocking each other and creating cover. It's just like they all ignore cover. That's just huge. So yeah, I was quite happy with that tweak to my list, taking a bigger unit of Glade Riders and giving them that banner. I think that's worked really well throughout the tournament. And even in that game, just having a few more bodies, right? Like a lot of Wood Elves just run 5 Glade Riders, but you can see I was down to my last 2 in that game. And yeah, if they'd gotten wiped out, then the mages are in trouble. They're getting hit by Doom Divers. So yeah, having a bulkier Glade Rider unit is definitely pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Have you got any parting thoughts that you want to impart for the Wood Elf players before you go?
For the Wood Elf players, I think, look, Wood Elves are I would say, a really tough army to learn how to play properly. I'd say they're probably the least welcoming army of any. So to the prospective Wood Elf players, I would just warn them that they are quite hard to use and quite unforgiving. I think a really strong Wood Elf list with an experienced pilot can be really effective, and there is a certain satisfaction of using this really complex and challenging army, definitely. But yeah, they are a difficult army to use. I think, on their day, they can be unstoppable, but they're very sensitive to pilot error, more than any other army. I mean, not always. Sometimes the dice, protect you, but yeah, it's so easy just to make one little slip up and then, oh, whoops, that cost me the game. Whereas other armies just don't have anything resembling that to that extent. So they're not beginner friendly. They're not forgiving, but they can be very powerful if you're willing to put in the time and really, really learn how to move units, especially fast units, really well. I think that's the key skill for Wood Elves. It's about positioning, and it's certainly taught me a lot about that aspect of the game. Like, I think different armies improve different aspects of your play, and Wood Elves really develop your positioning, your just that finesse side of the game, the movement, the controlling, the maneuver. So it is really interesting. But yeah, I would just put the caveat there to anyone who wants to use Wood Elves that yes, they can be effective, but you do have to put the hours in to learn how to use them, because you can easily just get absolutely stomped with Wood Elves unless you know the very specific and unique way of playing them,
Sure.
which is very, very avoidant oriented and very evasive and very different to how pretty much every other faction plays. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I said it was the last question, but one more just to make it fair for the non-Wood Elf players. If you're playing against this list, what do you do? How do you beat it?
Oh, how to counter it. I did give a few hints, I think, already, but from my perspective, what I really don't want to see is, yeah, like a mage unit that's really hard to attack and really fast, I would say.
Sure.
So something like the Black Orc unit, or even a mage on a dragon, protected by another dragon or something. Just a fast mage, or a Mortis engine. There's a Mortis engine with the +3 dispel range. The sisters also really don't like that. So yeah, fast mages that can't just be charged are really bad for the pillars, especially if they get the first turn and move everything up. And then once the sisters are doing contested casts, it's really tough. They're almost neutralized completely, or mostly. The army does still have other options. It's still got a dragon. It's still got lots of other things it can do, but that definitely takes a big portion of their strength away if you can get your mage into that position. So yeah, any list that wants to beat this list has to have that. I would say that's the key to it.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much.
No worries. My pleasure.